Hey guys, huge thanks to Mike Vaillancourt for talking with us last week. It was an awesome look inside the thought process of an art director. There were some really good questions and answers, just really good information for any aspiring professional artist to keep in mind. So I have made a condensed version of Mike's answers, sort of a too long didn't watch version of the video, because I think there's some really key information here, and I want it to be as accessible as possible for as many artists as possible. So that is the entire second part of this video. But first, let's kick off our next DPS Community Art Challenge, and I think this is going to be very good news for a lot of you. Fantasy Art Challenge. Here we go. Bring out your dragons, wizards, heroes, and monsters. Anything and everything fantasy, just make it awesome. We're going really broad with this one. Just the genre is your only guideline. I want to see what everyone can do with a wide open world. And these can make really compelling portfolio pieces for card art or box art markets, just to name a few. So let's really see what you guys can do. We'll have an official announcement with the schedule and other details in the DPS Discord community. And also my brush pack. The brushes that I'm using in this painting are now available for free in the freebies channel. So be sure to grab those if they will help your fantasy art shine. I can't wait to see what everyone comes up with. I know there are a lot of born fantasy artists in our ranks, so this is your moment. Thanks again to Mike for being so generous with his time. Once again, here are his awesome answers and insights from our chat last week.
Finalizing the brief and then coming up with the top 5 list of the illustrators that we want to work on it. I'd say a lot of the time we're going to folks that we've already worked with in-house, especially for this stuff, because it is the most forward-facing. You're not really going to want to take a risk on an untried talent that you've never worked with before, no matter how big their name is, because you never know, right?
Sure.
So it's going through the list of all of the artists that we've got, and like, okay, this artist I think is going to be the best fit for this particular packaging piece that we need. And then from there, it's contacting them, crossing my fingers and hoping that they have availability and they're interested in taking the job. So, and if they're not, it's okay. Go to number 2. So not constantly browsing, looking for a star in the midst. If I'm trying to find new talent, which I do at least a couple of times a month, I'll go through ArtStation or even Instagram sometimes and just kind of troll through and see what kind of work is out there that is somebody I've never seen before. Because you see a lot of the same faces working on the same things. And then, of course, the other thing that you run across is like, wow, this artist's portfolio is amazing. And you're like, oh, man, they're full-time at a studio already. So odds of me being able to get them may or may not work out in the long run. So trying to keep that pool like fresh. And then on top of that, being aware of folks, you're like, oh, this person is just like this close. If they like turn the corner, then they're going to be a rock star. And then from there, it's the, hi, you don't know me. And I introduce myself and I say, I would love to keep in contact with you. Or, do you have availability?
The golden email.
It's foundation skills. I'd say 99.9% of the time as I'm looking at foundation skills, it's how's your anatomy? How's your perspective? How's your color theory? And if you're drawing something that's meant to be a mechanical object, does it look like a mechanical object? Or does it, are all of your surfaces in proper round, right? Like, are you using your guides to get that nice perfect ellipse? Are you using your guides to get that nice straight line? Or if you can do it freehand and do like the 2-dot technique and stroke together, like I've done a billion times for drawing stuff like mechs and firearms and all that jazz, then it shows, right? It's the old adage of if it looks wrong, it is wrong. So if it looks right, it's right. And if I'm looking at a portfolio and all of those things are good, and I know that I'm not going to have to spend a ton of time doing a paint over to fix anatomical and perspective issues, then I'm very happy because that's, one less worry that I have on my plate. The turning the corner bit is when you're seeing all of the things working in concert with one another really well. And they have, for illustration in particular, it would be composition. Like, is their composition great? And more importantly too, if they have a really cool illustration and it's something that's going to be inside of the fantasy genre, and you haven't had any paid work with an existing IP, unless you're a phenomenal concept artist, that's the point where you don't want to be designing on the page. Because if you are designing on the page, the issue with that is that you're either going to be really good at one or the other most of the time, right?
Right.
You're not going to always be the best at both. So if you want to be a great illustrator, work with great designs, like pre-existing designs. If you want to be a great concept artist, just bang that stuff out, like draw your butt off and do the work. And I can talk about concept art and development all day from several levels, but yeah, primarily for me, I'm looking for illustration these days. So that's what it is.
Picking a lane, basically, pick a thing and max it out.
Find your passion. I learned basic perspective through How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And then I learned a lot about dynamic anatomy and planar forms through George Bridgman's Guide to Life Drawing. And, everybody loves Bridgman, but as I got older and wiser, not taking away anything from Bridgman or any of those other books, but I started falling in love with Loomis and life drawing. Like, I didn't understand the importance of life drawing when I was in college, but it was, I went and I was hanging out with a group of folks from the conceptart.org group way back in the day. And the Seattle group had a bunch of monsters. And when I mean monsters, like all of the guys that were a part of the Seattle chapter are now industry greats, like folks that you would recognize their work, but we were all just a bunch of dudes that were trying to figure out how to draw. And well, with the exception of a couple who had sketchbooks that would make you cry. But I actually talked to one of those guys and I was like, hey, what is it? Because I was trying to learn how to do creatures at the time. I already had the basic fundamentals for anatomy down, but I wasn't really getting the idea around like, what are the things that I'm missing? And he goes, dude, just go to life drawing. I'm like, what? He's like, go to life drawing. So every single weekend, I was stationed up on Whidbey Island in Washington here. And it was an hour and 30-minute drive. I would drive to downtown Seattle and I would go to this life drawing session every single Saturday from 9:15 until 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And I did that for, I want to say a year and a half. And like where my sketchbooks were before I did that versus where my sketchbooks were a year later was night and day. And just like doing studies, like regular studies, like that's something like, so I've got a 12-year-old son, right? And I wish that I could have talked to me at 12 years old to figure out like, what are the things I'm not doing right? How can I learn this better instead of just beating my head against the wall and just copying from comic books? And it's, study from life and, continually draw those things, because if you can draw, let me see, like a random object, like this wallet and perfect perspective and have all of your rendering and shading look realistic, that's only going to translate over into doing stuff that's for fantasy or sci-fi or whatever genre when you're doing like a hard surface render. Doing those studies in life drawing when they have a great model and they've got good lighting, like those are things that are invaluable because they lock into the back of your head and they can also inform like what are the things that you want to do to block in a scene later on. It could be like, I really like this one single spot from this side, created so much drama. And, it's not like the old comic book ways of like, okay, cool, I stink at drawing feet, so I'm just going to put a smoke screen down across the bottom of the page, or, I'm going to black this out because we're just going to do everything is in heavy shadow because I stink at drawing like the anatomy of the legs. So it's doing those studies is only going to make you better. And if you don't do the studies, like one of the questions I used to ask a lot of artists that would come up to me at conventions is I'd say, show me your sketchbook. This is back before tablets were a thing. And they'd say like, I don't have my sketchbook on me. And I'm like, why don't you have your sketchbook on you? You want to be a professional artist. You're not drawing all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of do from time to time. And you can already tell like there's a dedication there. I like the idea of being a professional artist. I don't like the work that goes into it. So the work is the hard part, right? It's all of those hours that nobody sees you working while you're grinding it out on active duty, or doing some desk job somewhere, or working in Best Buy or wherever you are, and that you're constantly just busting your butt. You get off of work because it's your passion. And then like when I was on active, I would get off of work, I'd be home off base back in the townhouse by around 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then I would draw and paint from 6 o'clock until midnight. And then I'd wake up in the morning at 5:30, do a quick brush up of my uniform, go back on base, do my job, come back home, repeat process. Then on Saturdays, hitting up life drawing. And then when I was on deployment, the whole time I was deployed, if I wasn't outside, it was back when I smoked. If I wasn't outside, like just sitting there with my sketchbook doodling on one of the benches, then I was out exploring and taking photos and getting mental reference for things that, I didn't have a basis for. So there are two things I can tell you that I learned over the years. The first one is when I was trying to break into comic books. There used to be this VHS series called Visits with the Comic Book Greats, and Todd McFarlane was one of them. And he said, yeah, put 6 to 8 pages inside of your book, and then take out the 2 worst ones and pretend they don't exist. And so whenever I'm looking at a portfolio, I am literally looking for your worst piece of artwork. And the reason why I'm looking for your worst piece is because if you thought that was okay to post up, then that's the level that you're thinking would be okay to give me on your bad day. So if that doesn't match up to what we need, then it's not going to be there. So if that's a piece that, even if it has sentimental value, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself and be like, nope, chuck it. Like, only put your best foot forward, because you're only as good as your worst piece, right? Like, we can be known for a billion amazing things that we do, but it's that one time we goof up that people are going to remember us for. I would say I would not do that. Your studies are your personal work, right? Like, your sketchbook is your personal work. That is the stuff that you do for fun. That's your warm-ups. That is the stuff that you do to prepare you for those portfolio pieces. And like I was just saying about portfolio work, I'm looking for that worst piece, and I know what your sketchbook looks like, but you can't always bank upon every art director out there having that same critical eye, or knowing like, oh, this is just their warm-up for funsies stuff, right? So you want to make sure that your portfolio is the most polished presentation of all of the things that you have done that you are proudest of. And by all of them, I don't mean literally all of them, unless you only have like a dozen things. But like, if you've only got 4 things to show, then that's cool. It's a work in progress. And then as you add more pieces to it, then you can go like, okay, this piece is better than that piece. And you pull one thing out, add another 2, and continually develop that way. And for your sketchbooks, I mean, show them to your other artist friends. And I honestly think that sketchbooks and sketch groups and hanging out with other artists and being within close proximity is where you really grow the most, because you're both being inspired by what somebody else is doing, or somebody else might be inspired by something that you're doing, and it's going to push them, which in turn is going to inspire you when they come up with that next really cool thing. The first is deadlines. Like, solving deadlines is great. Like, hitting deadlines or delivering early, so we have plenty of time to be able to go through and explore a little bit more, or if there's any like little last bits that we want to kind of noodle on just a little bit more, that's great. But in all honesty, the way that I work is not the same way that all their ADs that I've worked with work. I typically am fairly hands-on just because of my background, where I'll ask, and Hardy can attest to this too, I'll ask for like 3 to 5 black and white thumbnail sketches, keep them dirty, or even if you like working in color, cool, but they can be super sloppy and loose. I can translate the best of chicken scratch because that's, everybody's got a sketchbook full of it. And then from there, I'll either pick the one that I like the most, or I'll do like a quick like mashup of, okay, cool, I really like the way this figure looks here. Let's shift it over there, but we'll adjust this arm to go this way. We'll adjust that to go that way. And then I'll send back like, here's what you sent me. Here's my mashup. Here's my paint over. And, what do you think? And if the artist says, I love it, then cool. If they say, oh, but what if, because I always want them to have the option, or sorry, not just have the option. I want the artist to be inspired by the work, and I want them to go, oh, there's another creative way that we could have solved this one problem. And then when they get back to me on it, it's usually an inspiring process. I try to keep it as collaborative as possible. I'm not an art dictator. I'm an art director. So I just try to help steer the ship towards like what the best solution is that I think works, but at the same time, also working with what the needs are for whatever the piece is that I'm art directing. And I want the artist to have as much creative freedom within the constraints of what we have to accomplish. I can tell you the reason why I wasn't learning anything wasn't because I didn't have fantastic teachers. It was because I was 18, naive, and did not understand how to learn. I was not at a place where, because I had a very specific mindset. I'm like, I want to do X and I'm not learning X. And that frustrated me. And that's why I left. Whereas I went back to school 6 years ago because I wanted to get that piece of paper that showed that, not only am I a professional, but I'm a professional who's got a degree. So, and going back to school in my then late 30s was night and day. Well, I mean, I've been doing it professionally for a while, so it definitely made coursework really easy. But at the same time, I also had a very different mindset where I was just absorbing information at a much faster rate. And it wasn't as much like, because I already had a foundation in everything that I was doing, is that it wasn't like drinking from the fire hose. It was nice because I was able to go, oh, I didn't know that one little trick that the teacher just taught us. And then I take that and put it into my toolkit, and I can use that moving forward. Like there's a ton of stuff I learned in Photoshop and Illustrator that I hadn't done before that was just mind blowing. Plus like Maya, we were talking earlier about technology. As an illustrator, there are other tools out there. Like I know a lot of artists, there are some artists that use things like Maya or ZBrush or Blender to help establish their blocking for scenes, right? Because you can go in there and you can rapidly generate like a building, and then you can take the camera wherever you want it. You can drop in a placeholder character to help you like get your perspective kind of dialed in like up front. So in school and illustration, it's listen to your teachers, do the work that they tell you to do, and turn it in on time. Because what you're really learning in school is you're learning how to process a bunch of information very quickly, apply it, and then hit a deadline. That's what you're getting out of that education, is you're understanding, or you're showing that you can do that. I mean, your portfolio speaks volumes about like your dedication to the craft, because there's tons of artists that go to school for illustration and then they come out the other side and their portfolio is not up to snuff to be able to get an actual illustration job for like pick a company, right? Unless it's something very specific and niche. So you want to bust your butt and use those times while you're in school. Go to life drawing that's offered to you. Take the time after school to hone your craft and make that piece. Treat every single assignment as if it's a portfolio piece and try to knock it out of the park, because your work is going to only benefit from the hard work and effort that you put into it, because that what you learn in that process, you can apply to something later. If it's something you've never done before, or even if it has been something you've done. So your goal is to get out the other side by having financially invested, depending upon where you live in the world, in your education, and then having something really awesome to show for it, which is both the degree and a great looking portfolio, or at least the building blocks for that portfolio that can get you that job.
See you next time, guys. In the meantime, good luck with your artwork. Paint something cool today.